big plate full here, and we got a lot of contributions on Instagram today. We'll be doing some shout outs to some people that contributed some suggestions. But I want you guys to understand that, like, I'm here for you guys. Again, if you haven't followed me on Instagram, be sure to follow me there and then provide any suggestions. So before I end up doing some of those things, I end up posting like questions and polls on my Instagram stories and in my posts so you guys can recommend things. So we had a couple people. I can see that Kanya's in the chat today. Don't worry, I got you. She requested us to draw Harley Quinn today. So we're going to try to get to as many of these suggestions as possible. If not, we'll have to get like a second session on tomorrow, do some more superheroes because I know it's a popular topic. So just a quick shout out at the top. We have EJTY wanted Spider-Man. This is on Instagram. Homo Sapien, Mr. Freeze. And then Kanya wanted Harley Quinn. Polar Bear 611 wanted Iron Man. Maureen Kerrigan Flavin wanted Batman. So I'm looking forward to that. And Janie XXB wanted Bigfoot. I don't know if Bigfoot is a superhero, but he's definitely a legend for sure. But I want to just talk to you about one of the, what I would say, supervillains of drawing is, especially beginning drawing, is on my page right now, and his name is Egghead. And I wanted to pull up this clip. This is his intro music. Hopefully you guys can hear this stuff.
Egghead, you are a big egghead.
Hey, I'm not an egghead. You're making me feel bad.
I didn't mean to hurt your feelings.
You don't even know me. My name is Carmichael.
I'm sorry.
What?
So if you guys know what that clip is from, put that in the chat. That's a deep cut right there. But I wanted to share that with you. It's something of an inside joke. I'll give you a hint. The hint is, and now a word from us kids. So that's a real big throwback. Any of you guys stuck watching PBS as a kid probably might be able to get that reference. All right, so this is the thing. We're talking about Egghead right now, and that's this drawing right here, if you can see him down here. All right, this is the classic Egghead stickman. All right, the problem with this guy is that, well, not only does he have no elbows, no knees, no feet, the problem is the head is way too big for the body. And I want to show you something because this is a major point that we're going to be covering throughout the day. And that is finding your unit of measurement when you're drawing. So thing is, we always, instead of measuring in inches or height in feet, we actually as artists use part of a body over and over again as a unit of measurement. And for drawing the whole body of a action figure or a person who's doing a pose, we always measure using the head. So think of the length of the head. If I draw a line from over here to here, okay, this measurement right here equals one head. So we're not going to be drawing things based on inches or exact. The cool thing about the head is it relates to the rest of the body. It'd be very strange if your head started shrinking or blowing up in comparison, but a lot of times when a lot of young artists or people who have little experience with this start overemphasizing the head, okay, and you end up with this egghead shape. And as we go, we're going to see how far off that really is. Now for superheroes, we normally say that they're 8 heads tall. So what I've done over here is kind of draw an 8-head scale. It's almost like a ruler, and each one of these heads can help me divide up the body of a superhero into good proportions. And if we don't start with that, things can get weird real quick. So bear with me here, but I want to show you a little hint about what we're doing. If you saw my Instagram story, there was some reference to this, but we're going to be learning how to draw real stick figures that have some superhero proportions. So I've drawn a few here to make it faster for us to fill that in, and I'll be teaching you guys how to make these real quick. But first, let's go back to Egghead here. Egghead is, let's count how many heads tall he is. So I'm just going to approximate. Here's the second head. Okay, third. He's not even 3.5 heads tall. Okay, now that's a major problem, but it's actually explained by a really fascinating thing. When we are babies, we naturally look at people's faces. So as we learn how to recognize people by more than just their voice, we focus a lot of our time on our face, right? If you see somebody, it's odd if you don't look them in the face. It's harder to read their emotions if you're not looking at their face. You can see some things from body language. You know, somebody has slumped shoulders or they're really high up like this. That can communicate, but their facial features is where we spend a lot of our time looking. It's really this triangle between your eyes and your mouth. Everything contained in there tends to be our focus. Same thing. Think about a smiley face. It's a big round circle, and then the eyes tend to fill up this whole thing. And if you've done some drawing of face proportions, which we'll cover in another video, you know that there's no way that your facial features are that big on your head. In fact, your eyes are halfway down your head from the height. But let's not dive too much into that. I want to just talk about how can we fix our stick figures so it makes it look more realistic, especially if you're trying to get heroic figures, big, tall, and exaggerated figures. Okay? First, before we start, I want to show you just some of the elements, okay? The head is an oval, and sometimes it takes some practice to get this egg shape, okay? We're still taking the egg head shape, okay? And we're not drawing any details yet. We're just setting the things up. You're going to need to be able to draw a line here, you know, vertical, horizontal. We're not going to be doing too much detail work at the start, but we are going to be using some smaller circles that will be showing us where our joints are. So a joint could be anything from, you know, where the fingers bend at our knuckles, or it could be, you know, our elbow. Let's see. There you go. Got to flex. Which way is the beach? Right over there. So this is the thing. Our elbow would be represented, and our whole hand, we can use a circle just to quickly draw in our hand as well. All right, so I'm going to just start off here, and I've already drawn out 8 heads tall. Okay, now I'm going to teach you how to do this very quickly without a ruler. Now, let's say I wanted to do the same thing. I'm going to just do it over here. Now I want you to imagine I'm going to put a line here and a line here. Oh, let's see if you can see that. There you go. So in between here and here, I want to make 8 separations, or I want to divide it up into 8 little lengths. But that's hard to imagine exactly where that's going to be. But I bet if I asked you, okay, place a line exactly in the middle between those lines, you could do that. You could say, all right, it's going to be about here. Okay? That's pretty easy. We just repeat that step again. So check this out. I'm going to go, instead of the whole length, I'm going to go in between here. Right? Same thing on this side. So I was splitting those in half. Now we have 4 blocks here. If we need 8, we just need to split each of these sections in half. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if somebody's telling you need to be very precise or measurement focused, artists are very infamous for using internal measurements. So using the head as a way to measure how tall the body is. And we just did that. So a good form of practice would be to put a couple ovals the same size just stacked on top of each other. And we're not going to be putting person's head like below their waist or anything. It's just that this is like the new inch or the new centimeter for you guys. As an artist, we measure in heads or other things. Like sometimes if you're drawing a face, you can measure in the eye width, right? So if you measured the eye, you could say, oh, this guy's head is 5 eyes wide. All right, here we go. So this is how you stack up your heads and make a little scale. I've already drawn one over here, which will set us up a little bit faster so we can get started. So first off, before we begin, I want you to know stick figures are meant to be thrown away. They are going to get erased if you get a good one, and there's going to be plenty of other ones that you practice that you'll just never end up using. But the point is why focus on the details of like, oh, this is Batman's mask. I'm going to get really close in there and draw the details, and then you realize his head is too big or too small. You have to erase it and start over. So it's always good to start with the general proportions, the general measurements, and then dive into all the details, which will get too much credit, right? So here we go. Now, the first head up here is exactly what I'm going to draw. So I'm going to draw a light line out here just to help me, okay? And I'm going to draw this oval, try to get it the same size. This might seem very small, okay? But the thing is, the key measurements to start off with are that first head, right up here, and then the midway point, okay? The midway point, okay, about 4 heads down, is going to be where we put our hips or pelvis. So I'm going to draw an oval. It's more of a circle like that, about halfway down, directly underneath. And I'm going to connect these two with a spine. Notice I didn't draw any of the bones in the spine. I just connected it with a straight line. Now this line right here, I want you to picture this is, down on your hips here where your leg joint attaches. That's where our legs are going to attach. And all you have to do from each one of these across here, you're going to draw a straight line down like this. Okay, so now we have our legs. And then halfway between, so at this quarter mark, we're going to put 2 circles about this big. And that represents the knees. Okay? Again, if you can't draw a circle and a line, like I said, I can't help you, but if you can, this is literally how all the pros do it. Okay? They might change it as they get a little bit more experience, but overall, this is going to be how they tend to draw their models before they spend any time picking out the costume or anything like that. All right, now the feet. Super easy. I forgot to mention this at the beginning. We're just going to draw a triangle, especially when we're seeing it from the front. So I'm just going to draw a triangle that's about half of a head tall. Okay, it's just a placeholder. No details that are recognizable really here. Okay, and then we're going to go right below the chin. We're going to draw kind of a line that's more of like a parenthesis like this. Okay, it's a little bit wider than the hips. I like to put a little bit of a curve on it, and this is going to be that line of the shoulders here. Okay? Now, there's going to be some really interesting things when we get into detail here, but I'm just teaching you how to make this little robot, this stick figure. All right? Now, the last and most important thing in this portion is going to be the arms. Okay? Before we drop the arms, I'm going to draw 2 circles, similar like I did on the knee, right on the end. So it's like the ball and stick drawing here. And then about midway down from this section, right, where your thigh is, okay, I'm going to just put a little bit of a mark and put a circle right underneath there. Like if you were to stand up and see where your hands touch your thighs, they match somewhere around here, okay? Now, it's going to seem strange that we're drawing a ball for the hands. It's really nice if you're drawing a fist, right? But your fingers extend past that. But I want you to see the palm. That's what we're drawing here. The palm, or it's a fist. That's what's great about this ball. I'm going to drop a line down. Doesn't have to be perfectly straight. Very few lines in the body are perfectly straight. But we're just getting the proportions right. And then halfway in between, we're going to put another ball, which will be the elbow. All right, that's all you need to know. Now, there's certain artists that might suggest putting a little bit more detail in, but what I've found is that this is a really minimal way to get started on any type of drawing that you want to get started on, and you won't waste time, okay? So why did we figure out this way to draw a stick figure when we're trying to draw this really detailed superhero in the end? Well, again, it's about your time. Do you want to waste your time drawing details and then find out they're in the wrong spot? There's nothing more frustrating. So, especially when you're creating a pose, and let me pull up a picture here of, let's see, let's pull up Iron Man here. Okay, if you look at this pose, he's no longer in this pose here. But the cool thing is I can very quickly draw out this pose, and we'll do that right now. So I'm going to put his head back in there. So second one. Okay, it looks like his spine is pretty straight, right? It's going right down from his head, so I'm going to draw that about halfway. And then mark my halfway point. And I'm going to draw the pelvis slightly wider than the head. And again, his left hand, or I guess it's his right, but it's on the left side, that's kind of blocking where that shoulder is, and we're going to use that in a second. So here's the shoulder, I'm going to put that shoulder joint down there with the circles. And we'll just do the legs first, but we notice that they're spread out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is from that little intersection, like I said, I drew that line across. This area is right where the joint is, where the leg connects. I'm going to draw an angle. I'm trying to trace that angle. I don't know if you can see it. It's about like this in the leg drawing that I'm seeing. You guys, I can't transfer it over right now, but you see what I mean. I'm just going to draw it over like this. And I'm going to draw another one here. Now, technically, he's going to get a little bit shorter, okay, because he's, if you like spread your legs and stand up, technically your head will go down a little bit. We're not going to worry about that just yet, but I just want to get the general pose. Let's work on his arm over here. So you notice that it's coming off at an angle. I'm just going to sketch that angle in, but I'm going to leave it a little bit of a curve. And that elbow is going to be about halfway. And the hand, I'm focusing on the palm here, is right here. If you want to show the direction of the fingers, you can kind of just draw like a little hook there. But let's focus on this hand over here, the other one that's reaching towards us. Now, I want you guys to look at my face cam here. Now, let's picture the hand if it's at like my face away from you, right? So it's even with the side of my face. What happens to it as it gets closer to the camera? Two things. It gets larger and it blocks out whatever's behind it. So since we're not drawing the fingers here, what we're going to do is use the circle to show us how big that thing's going to get. The other part is that the hand is almost blocking the elbow. So let's see if you can see that. You can see the elbow a little bit, but it's definitely almost more of like a circular tube heading towards you. So if you did that perspective video, right, where you're looking down the tube towards the vanishing point, that's exactly what's happening. And we call it foreshortening. So when you're not seeing the length of the hand like this, but when it comes down, technically it's shorter from top to bottom. So from up here down to here, that's a shorter length than the whole arm, right? You can't even fit that on the camera. So here we go. I'm going to draw this new hand right here. It's almost blocking the shoulder. It's bigger, almost as big as the head. And then I'm going to put the elbow slightly smaller just down besides there. So we just created a pose and mapped that onto our Iron Man thing from a reference that you found, okay? Now let's do another one. Spider-Man, okay? This one, same thing, overlapping on that arm that's coming forward, right? So it's almost blocking his face, but it's much larger. But it's a little bit crazier because his spine and his legs are in a totally different pose. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but I want you to see why it's important to do a stick figure first, because it's a complex drawing. So here we go. I'm gonna notice that first his head is at an angle, all right? And I'm going to start it up here because I want you guys to see how, because he scrunched up his body, how long is this guy going to be? Right? I'm going to draw his spine. I'm kind of like visualizing where it is. And then I'm going to draw his pelvis down here. And I'm adding kind of a curve to his spine. Okay, there's his pelvis. I'm going to draw a straight line across here. And I notice that the top of his leg is coming out over here, and then his knee stops. I don't even see this part of the leg behind it. There's actually just like a little bit of a foot right there. But since it's farther away, it looks a little bit smaller. Let's try again. This other leg is going to start here. It's got a little bit of a curve to it. Here's the knee. And this foot is a little bit farther away, but notice that this stick is way shorter than this whole bottom part of the leg. And when I draw feet that aren't front on, I just draw like a line or a little bit of a triangle to show the direction of the foot. Okay, now this is a little bit tricky. See that line we did at the shoulders before? We need to actually change that because the actual shoulder of this guy, like if you can picture right now, this is the Iron Man pose, right? The shoulders are even. But now he's kind of turned towards us. So the shoulder circle is going to get a little bit larger. It's getting towards us a little bit more. And it's almost even with his head. So if you look, I'm pointing to the drawing right now. His head here, the hand and like shoulder almost are even with his head. So I'm going to draw the shoulder first. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, almost as big as his head. And his far shoulder is behind his head now, like this. Now we don't even see any of the arm really. We just see his hand. So I'm just gonna, just so you guys can see it, I'll draw like the fingers on here. But that's his, oh wait, this was his shoulder, right? So we need another bigger one. That's gonna be his hand. It's basically stacked right on top of there. So the line goes behind his head to connect with there, with the shoulder. And what about this hand? Now, if you're having trouble figuring out how far to draw this hand out, I want you to think about his knee, okay? Imagine a line between his knee and his hand. That has an angle to it. So if I kind of like hold this over here, use that same angle and try to draw something out like this. And if I match the angle of the arm, wherever I connect those two, that's usually where the hand is going to be. I can erase this line in a minute, but I'm just going to draw this hand and this elbow right there. Now, I want us to count, though, how many heads tall this thing is. Head is the same size as all of these characters, right? But why is he shorter? It's because he crunched up his body, right? So the thing is when you move your characters, things might change a little bit, but it's a lot easier to compare the size and location of things based on these poses when you're just using balls and sticks instead of all the details, getting lost in all of Spider-Man's details here. So before I spend any more time on Spider-Man or Iron Man, I'm going to move on. I have some other stuff drawn for you already. And that's going to be some stuff where we're focusing on how do we start to beef up these characters to give them a little bit more weight instead of just looking like, you know, a ball and stick figure. Well, let me just find the right photo here. Okay, so I have this picture of Harley Quinn. It's from the movie. I hope that's all right. But I think it's going to be an important thing if we kind of just talk about the differences between also male and female figures. Okay? Now I have, these are 8 heads tall, same formula, okay? But I'm going to just talk about the difference between, let's do Iron Man and Harley Quinn. So I'm going to start off with Iron Man because his pose, but I'm not going to have his legs like this. I'm just going to pretend like he has both hands down, and we'll start by drawing those features. Okay? The first step from going from our stick figure to the next level is going to be to pipe up the characters. So when I say pipe, I mean P-I-P-E. Okay? So we're going from sticks to pipes, or like cylinder shapes. All right? And we use the actual circles here. Think of them more as a ball, a sphere, and that's going to help you think about beefing up these characters. So I'm just going to create these pipes that go around and connect these figures. This is where the muscles are going to take place. This is not super exact. The chin right over here. Okay? Just slightly above the chin. All right? And then for the legs, for the top portion, these are going to get pretty wide. They're going to go all the way to kind of like the middle right here. And then from here, I want you to pretend like you're a race car trying to take this curve, but you take it a little bit too far and you just round it out. Remember, superheroes are known for having really insane muscles, right? And you can kind of see those big quads, those big muscles on his thigh there. And then for the calf, make it a little bit more of like it narrows towards the bottom, right? Now he's looking pretty empty right here, but I wanted you to just focus on like his abs and his chest up here, okay? So we've made this guy pretty beefed up, but I want to just focus on this V shape. So for male figures, there's usually a V-like shape if you were to draw it down to this intersection. Okay, that's a good place to start. But then from about here, I want you to draw some lines up over here. Okay, so we've beefed up this character quite a bit. All right, and in some ways, this guy looks more like the Hulk. He's got some pretty broad shoulders. But what you might be confused about is the neck here. And what I want to point out here is, look at my shoulders. If I imagined a line that goes up, it actually goes almost to my mouth and then back down. Superheroes who have very developed muscles in their shoulders here are going to be like even beefier. Okay, some people have less developed muscles and you'll see it and it'll appear to be a longer neck, but focus on like where this shirt is. Okay, this area is called the pit of the neck. You can kind of feel this little bone here. Okay, don't press too hard, but that's going to be something we need to draw in. So I'm going to drop his neck about the same width of his head and just put it in just like this. If he was wearing a t-shirt, that's where it would be, and that might help you start to see what's going on. So this would be what we call a piped up figure. We give it a little bit of mass. Okay, notice I didn't put any fingers or any other costume stuff on there, but the next step is to kind of muscle these guys up. So I'm going to see if I can zoom in on this Iron Man here, so we can see his kind of chest, shoulder, and bicep muscles. Okay, it can be really helpful to look at some other artists' work in order to practice this stuff. But we're going to actually maybe do some erasing eventually, but I just want to help you divide these things up. Okay, now the first thing I want to do is kind of draw the rib cage, and that's this top part. If you think about right here, your ribs kind of go up like this, right? And then down here is like your abs, and your waist, right? The top of like the hips basically are about right here. So if the person was wearing a belt, it would be at the top of that pelvis area. Now for men especially, and like the beefed up chest, put a line that's about 2 heads down. This is kind of the pecs, right? Pecs are going to go over here. Abs kind of flow through. And like on Iron Man's costume, he even has some armor that goes up like this, that accentuates those muscles. But notice that it comes down to kind of like a V below the neck. That is showing us that pit of the neck over there. Okay, so his neck probably goes down here, and we're adding some muscles to go with it. All right, now let's focus on his shoulder. He's got some nice armor here, so I'm going to beef this up a little bit. But I want you to think of it as, it almost goes behind here. It's almost like a turtle shell. Think of that muscle that goes over the shoulder as like a turtle shell. Okay? And then his bicep really pops out. It's like another oval right here. Okay? These are all basic shapes, guys. I'm doing this quickly. Okay? So here's his shoulders. Now let's look at his forearms. They're pretty beefed up towards the elbow, so we'll add some more right here. Right? So I'm adding these shapes in, and sometimes it looks like armor or some other part of the costume, but the costumes are designed to show you and feature those muscles. Okay, now when it comes to the legs, there's a lot of interesting groups of muscle, but I want you guys to see these teardrop shapes in the quads. Okay, so sometimes it helps just to sketch in like this teardrop shape that goes in like this. And then a lot of times you'll see the costume, if it's like a traditional, Superman type person, they'll show kind of like that swimsuit line Speedo look, right? That's going to show you the curve of those legs. Okay, but it's also showing some of those muscles popping out. So if you're thinking about this and wondering like, well, this is for superheroes, how does it differ for like actual people? Well, technically, a superhero is like an 8 foot tall person is pretty uncommon. You know, maybe a basketball player might have that. Uh, wait, what? Men are pizza? Is this the pizza shape? I'm not sure. And then, yeah, Jane is talking about a Speedo. I'm sorry. But this is the thing, is like these guys are definitely bulked up. So they have exaggerated proportions to make them look really big and gigantic. So a normal person is only going to be between 7 and 7.5 heads tall. So if you're like, why am I not 8 heads tall? I measured and stuff. It's like, it's okay. You're human. That's why. Okay, let's go back to the calf. So I'm going to try to zoom in on that. See how much that bulges out on the side? Like these are big, big muscles. So like I said, I'm not too worried about it. What you might be wondering is why does it get skinnier at the knee? That's pretty common, okay? But even on this drawing, you notice above his knee, there's like this little area like that. Sometimes I draw like the kneecaps, almost like little triangles here. Uh, there's a lot of crazy muscles, and I could do another video like almost on the anatomy. We're not going to spend too much time. Now the feet, we're not going to spend too much time on just now, but I want you to think, where's that ankle, right? On the inside, we have an ankle like this. And then I want you to put on the inside there's the big toe, and just draw a little ramp down. That's kind of like what your feet look like. We're focusing on that big toe. They're standing flat right there. And then let's just kind of make him look like Iron Man a little bit. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you. Okay, so I'm just going to add his face. It looks like it's kind of a V shape at the top. His eyes still have kind of a V shape. They're about halfway down the head. And I can make this a little bit bigger just to show a little bit more. So here's his eyes. We can always come back to this guy if we need to. But his mask kind of comes down like this to more of a robot looking thing. You can't show much emotion inside of this helmet. Let's just say that. And we'll make his neck a little bit more beefed up. I'm kind of liking this. But I want you to see, like, we went from this stick figure all the way to kind of this basic superhero format without much work, right? And I'm not spending too much time on the faces here, but if you wanted to add some of those features of his costume, looks like he's got, his little, what's that thing called in his chest? I can't remember. He's got some armor that goes down. What's interesting is like all these angles are meant to show things. Like this is like the bottom, like if you feel down at the bottom of your rib cage in the middle, like this piece of armor is designed to go there, and then he's got these kind of like chiseled abs that go down into the middle. So again, if you are trying to achieve the superhero look through your diet or exercise, good luck to you. It seems insane. I wouldn't try. All right, so we got a basic Iron Man. He doesn't really have a Speedo, so whatever. But my point is we got those proportions pretty much down. We didn't spend too much on his hands, okay? But let's say you wanted to just draw him with fists. Think of a straight line for the back of the hand right here. Another straight line here and then in. So we're going to do the top, those first knuckles, and like this. Okay. So Sometimes it's just easier to draw it in, not to put too many details. But for now, I feel like that looks pretty good. So the cool thing is we're about a half hour in. We covered a lot of stuff. And I would say this drawing right here took me about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. As you get better at this, and as soon as you pick your pose, you're going to do really well with this as well. All right? So let's just remind ourselves of the process. We went from thinking about the egghead, who's only 3.5 heads tall, all the way up to 8 heads tall, and thinking about how we can make our poses a little bit more interesting. Okay? Oh, the thing in his chest is called the arc reactor. Thank you. Oh, there's SpongeBob from yesterday. Okay, so let's pick out a new one. Let's go back to Harley Quinn because she has a good pose. We'll kind of change our view so that we can kind of see that a little bit easier. Okay, so let's focus on adjusting this figure to match up with the picture we're looking at on the left. Okay, now the first thing I'm noticing, look at that baseball bat. Okay, I'm going to lighten up this stick figure a little bit. Hopefully you can still see it. Just a little bit. It's a ghost. Now her head is slightly angled, but I'm just going to kind of draw it same size, same height at the top. Okay. Now she might be a little bit shorter. Female characters tend to be a little bit shorter, but I'm going to leave it as is and we'll see how it turns out. Maybe what I'll do is let's give her 7.5. So here's going to be the bottom for her. All right, that means that midway is going to go up by about half there. I'm going to draw her pelvis, but I'm drawing a straight line, but I want you to look at her pelvis. It's going to be tilted slightly to the right. So try to get an angle that you think. So I'm using my pencil to do that and transfer that over. I think it's going to be about like this. Now with female characters, what you'll notice is that the pelvis can be generally wider, but it's typically not so much about it being bigger. It's just more about where we place this kind of waist area. Oh yeah, the heels definitely can compensate for the other stuff. So maybe we'll do that. Perfect. All right, thank you, Kanya. So here we go. We have this kind of angled thing, but I want you to picture this like your spine kind of has to connect straight here. So there's going to be a little bit of a curve to her spine that gives her this little, cocked to the side head there. Okay? But let's look at the baseball bat. That's the angle of her shoulders. We're going to draw that a little bit different. And one way to make characters appear more feminine is by making their shoulders a little bit narrower. Okay, so instead of them kind of arching out over really far, we're going to draw them in a little bit more narrow. So I gave her this little bit of swagger here, but it's also going to adjust where I want you to look at the knees. Okay, so the knee, you can see the right knee a little bit better, but there's kind of an angle to those as well. But let's kind of just imagine if you could see the bone in her leg here, the right side. The other part is that her feet are behind each other, so they kind of land in the same spot. So I have one going down, and here's the knee for the first one. The second one attaches up here, and it's going to go, that leg is almost entirely straight, but it's going to go down to the same point. Now her arms, I want you to think of this almost as like a W shape, right? She has the baseball bat is going right here. That might be a good way to judge. But let's focus on her upper right arm. It's almost vertical here. So I'm just going to draw a vertical line. So it's about the same angle from here to here. I think that's a good angle. There we go. Okay, same thing. Remember the bat gets lower over here, so it's going to force a little bit more of an angle on her hand. So I'm going to give her hand there and elbow right about there. Okay, so I want you guys to focus specifically. I think we got that gesture right, or her pose, but think about that spine. Your spine can't bend an amazing amount. It does bend, but it does stay, like if your pelvis is one way, your shoulders typically compensate the other way. It's hard to like bend both things at the same time, so it'll almost be parallel. That would be very odd, and you might get injured if you tried. So please don't do that. Oh, last thing. I noticed that this knee in the drawing, or in the picture I should say, is a little bit lower than the other one. So I'm going to put that here. Okay. And then her feet, I'm just going to put in like a little block in both areas because we haven't piped it up yet. Okay, so with a female figure, we talked a little bit about narrower shoulders, but what we're going to do is also raise the waist a little bit. Okay, so instead of like focusing on, like because we have a narrower rib cage, okay, so like if I just kind of drew the rib cage in like this, I'm going to focus on creating a more stark angle that creates that hourglass shape a little bit easier. So you'll see this curve a little bit more. So you'll notice even on her, we're just generalizing that shape. Now also notice, like if we focus on the pelvis right here, this is about where the top of her shorts are. The thing is that this outer orbit of the hips here, we're going to pipe that up, go down to the knee, goes in slightly at the knee, and then it's out with the calf. Part of that is covered by the boot. We notice that if we go down from the spine, we see the shape of her shorts here with this curve, and that's where this quad muscle goes to the knee. And then we see a little bit of a gap that comes through down to this one. We see this shape that gives some roundness to that pipe. It comes down to here. And we do the same for that little thigh. So notice how it pops out, right? There's an angle there. It pops out for, I'm sorry, her calf. All right. Let's do her arms. They're a little bit more, they get wider towards the elbow. And we're not focusing on so much on adding like crazy biceps here. We're just piping it up. And I'm going to draw, if you notice like from before, her head is kind of stuck forward a little bit. So I'm going to lower her chin. And just for now, I'll add where those ponytails are going to go. All right. Let's just kind of finish up, draw where this baseball bat would be. Looks like we got a pretty good pose for here. Not saying it's perfect, but I think I might actually bring this out, this shoulder in a little bit more. It's more like that. So what you'll notice is that I make adjustments all the time, and you don't really know until you do it, right? You just got to check it out. I also think that this might need to come out a little bit more. And you'll get a sense for how this thing balances out. Okay, so we got her all set up. Um, and let's start to add some of the costume elements into here. Okay. First off, I'm just putting some basic shapes in for the hairstyle. She kind of looks like she just has big ears right now. And she's got some pretty mean eyebrows. Okay, I'm just gonna like halfway down her head is where the eyes are gonna be. I'm just having them as a basic shadow, and her mouth is gonna be about here. Okay, she's got this shirt on that kind of just below her chin, and it's gonna go across her shoulders, and it's relatively short on the sides. Let's zoom in to see. Uh-oh. Let's see, what was that? Sorry, I'm having trouble getting my... Dumbo was quaking. I like that. Oh, I'm just not doing very good right now with this thing. Here we go. Harley Quinn. Come on, let's make you bigger. It's not working. Anyway, so let's just draw the top of her, that color separation, right? It's kind of higher up. And then you're going to see it drop in for a little bit more dramatic curve here. And the sleeve kind of ends around here. It's a relatively short sleeve. And notice I didn't beef up the shoulder muscles as much. And remember, she's kind of pushing her head forward a little bit, so her chin gets a little bit lower than before. Okay. All right. Now the shirt, if you want to think about where your belly button is, it's about in between, like if this is her rib cage here, it's right about in between here. So if her belly button's there, her shirt kind of goes below there at an angle. It definitely follows the shape of the body here. Strong is getting a little messy with our lines, but notice how I'm not using many straight lines. So to follow the curve, I'm using curved lines, and I'm following the upper part of her leg here to draw that shape. And I'm really accentuating those curves as I go down, but notice that this part of the pelvis kind of pops out, and this leg, like this is kind of flat here. And then it doesn't pop out again until below the knee with those calves. All right, so let's just clean this up real quick and add a few more details. And this is where you start to see, like, did these things work? These stick figures are meant to be erased, like I said. Or if you're working on like Procreate, you could just create these on a different layer. But even if you leave kind of like a little ghost of them in the background, they're pretty helpful for later use. And you could say, I just need to kind of mess with that a little bit. I don't know. There's something, I feel like this leg needs to go out a little bit more, and this one needs to be here, but we could spend all day looking at this stuff. And her boots go up about halfway, so this is going to be all boots. And you could certainly play with where her hands are. And I don't like to spend too much time on those details in these types of sketches, but you can start to see how it can be really fun as you add them in. But try to simplify the shapes as much as possible. She's got these like gloves on. Notice how the back of the arm goes behind her back. Like if you lift up your arm and feel this muscle here that's holding like your armpit, there's all sorts of cool things that connect back through like the shoulder blade. You know, you need to think about that type of stuff. We're not just a flat picture. We have some overlapping areas. So looks like she has these like a backpack or like some type of strap that's going to go over here. And I think she has like a bag on. So we'll do something like that. But I mean, you're pretty much set up to do some stuff. You could add some tears in the shirt. You could do, you know, the words, if you wanted to draw them, they're going to be right about here. And sometimes you can put a shadow over here, show her chest, and really clean up these lines to just lighten it up. But overall, I think we've kind of just started to give you guys some basic formats, and we've shown the differences in the poses, right? So if you want me to spend some more time on this one, let me know. But I'd love to see if you try out some of these characters and you add some more details, please send them my way. Let's see, what else we have. How about Spider-Man? Or we did kind of Spider-Man before. Oh, we didn't do Batman. Let me see if I can find him. Hold on. Okay. There's Mr. Freeze. There's Spider-Man. There's Iron Man. Okay, I'm not sure. Oh, there he is. This is kind of a cool pose. And I want to see if we can... I think I'm going to make him a little bit bigger so you guys can see him a little bit more. So I'm going to cover my own face up here so you guys can look more specifically at this guy. And he's in a really dramatic pose here. So the cool thing about capes and all that other stuff is they're way easier to draw than the body. But if we use a similar idea, we'll be able to... Oh, say hi to SpongeBob again. We'll be able to really do this one quick. So let me just get set up with a fresh page. All right, here we go. Now, with this guy, obviously we need to take into account the scene. So I'm going to draw just a horizontal line here. He's going to be on this ledge. Doesn't have to be anything fancy at this point. All right. If you had to summarize like what shape this guy is, I'm focusing on this kind of just after the ledge ends, right? We have his knee here. And sometimes what I like to do is just put a containment line, just like a general shape. It's kind of like this. It's like a blob. Right? So his body kind of arches forward like this. He's got a knee that comes through over here. And I also know that I have a cape kind of comes around behind that ledge, right? Like it's behind the figure, behind the ledge. And then we have one that comes across. So from the back side, he's actually holding the cape if you see his hand. And there's like these kind of draping triangles here. All sorts of little shadows and stuff. But let's try to locate his head. It's kind of towards the front of this hunch. Okay? Now here we don't have like the luxury of just measuring everything out. But I want to make sure I can try to get this head close in proportion to here. So I can measure down. I'm going to say he's one head here, about 2 down to here. There's his shoulder, right? We already kind of like located that correctly. Hits his knee. So that's about 1 head below, maybe a little bit lower. So you see what I'm doing? This is 1 head. Here's 2. But where is he at 3? I would say it's about that knee. Okay, so I notice that his fist is right here. I'm just going to draw a circle. The knee is literally right here, so I'm going to draw that circle as well. I'm going to draw a line and try to find his pelvis. Okay, so his pelvis is somewhere in here, right? That means that his other leg has to connect somehow. It looks like it's going down at an angle here. Like that's his knee, he's kneeling. And his other leg is like this, and then his foot is literally going down like that. All the shadows, it's kind of hard to see. but you get some really good muscle definition. So the front of his body, okay, we see his shoulder's probably back here, and there's one, because it's closer, is nice and big up here, and it follows his arm. This little hump in the cape is his other elbow. As he draws down, here's his other hand where he's grabbing the cape. So sometimes it's done a little bit backwards, especially if you're studying from somebody else. But his backbone, his spine is probably arched forward like that. Shoulders are right here. And his other foot is probably somewhere out here, but the artist doesn't really show it in this picture. Okay? So there'd be a knee right there. There's his foot. So at least we know that we can transfer this and we're getting that nice sense of motion that's really dramatic. Okay? Let's just go into some of the details. All right. Now, his horns of the bat are kind of tilted forward. I'm just going to put those in because they're pretty important for this character. All right? And his mask goes about halfway down his face. We're not going to spend too much time on it, but it does kind of feature his very strong chin. Okay? But we just put that right on top of the drawing we were doing. Now let's focus on piping this guy up. So we got this really strong elbow shape here. Look at how beefy his forearms are. Okay, we don't even see really his, we definitely see kind of like his shoulder, but this cape goes directly from the pit of the neck across and just shows that elbow. So there's all these lines that kind of just go across and drape, but that pit of his neck right here is also going to cover up most of this shoulder, kind of wrap around his body, and you see just a little bit of his symbol underneath. Okay, his body is going to kind of be crunched over here. You see how the lines on his chest, like under the pecs here, follow this line that shows the turn. And if his shoulder's over here, that means like the rest of his body is about like this, right? This would be a really uncomfortable pose to be in. But we're definitely showing the power of his muscles, kind of like flexing. All right. Now in this one, it looks like we got the pose pretty much correct. So let's just start to add some things. Now, if you look at his hand, you can see how it like kind of goes around and shows his thumb a little bit. That's what's interesting about some of these, is like they use really dark things to show like, or like cover up some of the details. And as an artist, if you're lazy and you don't want to have to draw everything, you can just put it in a shadow and then you won't have to worry about it. Okay, so let's just focus on the back here. This cape, there's all these lines that go around. There's the back of his head. Bring the nose down a little bit. And let's look at his, like behind the knee. You kind of see this shape, really muscular. And you just see things like this, like the top of his calf right there. And then you see that separation. Remember I talked about that quad? There's a shadow right there and it kind of divides out. And a lot of this stuff is in shadow. I'm actually going to grab a shading pencil. We'll just do a very quick shading run here. So I'm just looking for the darkest areas kind of behind this shoulder. And then obviously in between here we basically don't see anything. underneath his leg. This gets dark, dark. Basically just see the top of his foot. And there's definitely a shadow underneath. So the cool thing is this artist definitely used shadows to his advantage, not even showing too many of the features. Basically the whole back side of his mask is dark as well. The nose. Right under his head there's a shadow. It kind of shows where that cape starts. And he has like a belt on, right, that goes across where that pelvis would be. And that just goes directly into darkness. So I want you guys to just know that, like, I'm just like you guys. I'm practicing these things. I literally pulled up these pictures right before we started. But why have I been able to just quickly draw them? It's because I know exactly where things go because I plan it out in stick figures first. Alright, we could try to put his symbol in there a little bit. I can hardly see it, but let's just... You could go in there with some straight lines now. But I want you guys to just have some fun with this. I'm hoping this is helpful for you. It's combining a lot of different skills, but I wanted you to see that underneath it all are these simple shapes. And I hope you can find some use for it. Alright, so does anyone have any questions, by the way? Because we're going to have to wrap up, and I'll give in about 5-6 minutes, but I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if there was a drawing you wanted to see again, or for me to explain a certain part. I'll do a quick review before we leave. I guess I could do... What else are we going to do? We didn't do Mr. Freeze. I guess we could do Mr. Freeze real quick if you want. I'm just going to do like the top half of him. We'll just use this... hold on, let me just turn off Batman here. You can see me again. Let's see. That's Spider-Man. There's Mr. Freeze. Make him a little bit bigger. Alright, I'm just going to focus on some of his upper body here, if it's alright, for the end of this, and then we'll wrap it up. So keep in mind that his costume kind of covers some of the basic stuff. So his head is kind of floating above. He's got these glasses on. So just kind of loosely putting those in right now. He's bald, so makes it easier. But then he's got this thing that goes up above his head. But since it's kind of a mechanical apparatus, you want to make sure that that goes above where the shoulders normally would. And then goes a little bit lower than his head. Probably turns forward slightly. But as we're kind of wrapping up here, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going to be doing this pretty much every day. But if you haven't already, follow me on Instagram. And if you have requests, like if you want to do another day of superheroes, I'd be happy to do that. Or you have specific questions, hit me up on Instagram is like the easiest way, or in the comments in the video. I'd love to hear. Totally irrelevant, but who's your favorite superhero? I would say Spider-Man was kind of like my first uh, favorite. Um, but what's his name from Guardians of the Galaxy? Is it Rocky Raccoon or whatever? That dude is pretty awesome as well. Is it Rocky Raccoon? Am I making a fool of myself right now? But I really, oh, actually, Ant Man's pretty awesome too. I think that's one of the funniest ones. I really enjoy that. Anyway, so here's this guy. Look at where the plates are on his armor. They follow what we call our pecs, right? He's got these like pecs right on here. The cool thing is like I didn't even bother to pipe this guy up, but I want you guys to see is like the nice thing about doing these stick figures is like they're just placeholders. It's almost like a fill in the blank game. If you just draw this stuff out, you'll be surprised how much headache you're gonna save. And forget drawing like other people's superheroes. Like all these superheroes were somebody else's idea. You guys should like come up with your own. That's the fun of it. It's supposed to be creativity, right? And oh, Rocket. Why am I thinking? Yeah, Rocket, not Rocky. I'm thinking of the Beatles song. Thank you, Kanye. You've been very helpful. Not gonna be. This guy's face is looking a little janky. I'm gonna try to make him look a little bit more sinister. Oh, one other tip I have for you, especially when you're drawing this stuff, make sure you give yourself, like I'm drawing on a pretty large piece of paper right now. If you draw small, you're only using like the hand muscles in here. I like to use my whole arm. So notice how my fingers aren't moving. It's like my whole arm. Try to get your fingers loose as you go. And if you see me kind of like cutting corners here, it's just because I've been doing this for such a long time that I can kind of like just really improvise. You get the basics down. I've been drawing pretty much every day for, you know, professionally for the last 10 years. But the thing is like, how did I get to this point? Is I literally started just like you, checking out books at the library. Luckily, you guys have YouTube. I never had this. But like I said, make your life easy. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. You have so much stuff out there. But the thing is, you don't even really need anything but paper and a pencil and your imagination. And you're able to just create these characters basically out of thin air. They're just shapes. If you want to get really like crazy about it, like what is a drawing? It's just smearing dirt on a piece of paper, right? So I want you guys to just feel comfortable. It's really not that big of a deal. Practice. Don't be afraid to mess up. Everybody messes up. And I used to tell my students when I used to teach in the classroom is like, in order to make good drawings, you just have to make a ton of bad drawings. It's just how it goes. But if you know that that's coming, like just enjoy it. That's the beauty of it. Especially nowadays, you got all this time indoors. All right. So you can see how we did all of this stuff pretty quickly. I mean, in under an hour, we have, these are pretty fleshed out characters. We also talked about a lot of the basics. And I just want you guys to remember that, first of all, here, wait, let me just get off of here. I just want you guys to remember that, number one, as I'm here for you, there's tons of other artists on YouTube and on Instagram that would love to help you out, especially during this time. But just so you know, I'll be here every day, 3:30, for as long as we're stuck inside. So I want you guys to know that, like, I really depend on you guys for, inspiration. And if you know somebody who would enjoy this type of content, please ask them to like and subscribe, or just share it with somebody else that especially is like trying not to go crazy by staying inside all the time. But I really hope that this got you thinking, and I really, really, really want all of you, if you tried drawing this on your own or you get to sometime this week, be sure to follow me on Instagram and then post and then tag me in the post. So it's just Art with Anderson. If you look at this, it's basically, here, I'll put it in the front so you can see it. I'll make it bigger. Oh no, I'm sorry guys, this is just kind of not really working, but I want you guys to know at the bottom, on the bottom left here, Art with Anderson on Instagram. Hey Sean, thanks for tuning in. But like I said, every day, 3:30, be there. Tell your friends. Even if they don't like art, just have them come in and check it out. Maybe they just like something on in the background. Anyway, I'm talking too much, but I hope you guys enjoyed today's lesson. Again, hit me up on Instagram. That's the easiest way to send me a request. But otherwise, leave comments on the video if you have suggestions. Even if you think of a new idea for me to improve my casts and everything. So again, thanks, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.